Alright, so welcome to how to use the golden apple. The golden apple is found in the utility section and is the golden apple icon. It costs 3 gold in all game modes and its lore is well-rounded healing. This item pairs well with everything. If you're going in for a team and you want to be as prepared as possible to ensure that you get the bed, then what you can do is eat the apple before you begin your assault on the opposing team. This makes it so that you can live for longer than you otherwise would have, and in some cases it can make it so that you have just enough health left to break the bed before you die, or win you that crucial fight that you needed to win in order to advance further into your enemy's base. Alternatively, you can also use this to better prepare yourself to final kill someone who is also pretty stacked. This tactic is known by many as pre-gapping, or what I like to call it when people do this to me in the early game, the I just wasted 3 gold and now I'm broke tactic.
What a loser, am I right?
The reason that I call it that is because in the early game, you really don't have a ton of gold to spend at all, and the gapple isn't so helpful as to spend 3 gold immediately for, especially in solos and doubles, where TNT is just 1 gold more than the gapple. The value that you get out of your gold if you bought a gapple but versus if you bought a TNT is just a 9-day difference. The TNT is so much more beneficial in the early game since it gives more offensive options than the gapple would. I would only invest in a gapple in the early game if my bed gets destroyed, and if I'm forced to win a fight in order to escape. Otherwise, you're better off just buying a TNT in most cases. In 3s and 4s, it isn't quite as bad to invest in the gapple in the early game because of the faster gen and higher prices of items in the shop, but again, it loses to the value of buying a golden tool instead. With a golden tool, you can break beds incredibly fast in the early game, and even if you die, you still have an iron tool for your next rush, which also isn't bad. The gapple just gives you slightly more HP and a little bit of regen, but that's it. If you lose a fight, you're done. Anyways, if you want to use this tactic most efficiently, make sure that you're sufficiently prepared and have enough resources left over before going in. That way, if you fail, you can still recover from your losses and continue to push. I'm sure that most of you have had many times where you may have won a fight that you needed to win in order to progress further, but you didn't have the health to continue onwards efficiently. That's where this tactic comes in. If you eat a gapple after every single intense fight that you win, then you'll be in much better shape to take on your next opponent. This tactic is best for gaining ground and momentum against your enemies who are far away from your base, especially in solo mode where it's pretty much impossible to flank somebody. This tactic ensures that you can maintain your momentum against your opponent as long as you win the fight. However, what I don't want you guys to do is eat a gapple when you clearly have enough health to take on another person, or buy a gapple when you have a very limited supply of gold left that you should be saving for other things first. Those would just be unnecessary and wasteful uses of your gold that you really should save or spend on other things that will be more beneficial in the long run. I would only suggest using this tactic if you have around half HP or lower after your most recent fight, and you know that you have a sufficient amount of gold left to sustain you during your run, and so that you can pick yourself back up again if you fail. If you are in the middle of an encounter at or very near your base and you realize that you won't be able to tech your bed on your own, then what you can do if you have a gapple is to eat it just prior to the encounter or in the middle of your encounter while you still have sufficient health left in order to stall enough time for your teammate to respawn and help you out. The absorption hearts and regen you obtain from the gapple allow you to survive for longer than you would have otherwise, which would potentially buy you just enough time for your teammate to respawn after hearing that your base is under attack. Be extremely vigilant while using this tactic, because remember that your opponent does not necessarily have to kill you in order to break your bed, so keep an eye out for people who may just try to avoid you to get your bed. Become a wall that Donald Trump will be proud of. That is your only objective here while using this tactic. This one should be obvious, but if you have previously sustained a lot of damage and you have enough time to consume a gapple that you have, then what you can do is eat that gapple to recover health as quickly as possible. Be sure that you have a good supply of these while you're on the run, since they will come in handy for when you are in need of recovering health, since a single gapple will heal you 2.5 hearts throughout its duration. Giving a gapple to your teammate when they are low is also something that you can do so that you have a much greater chance of winning the game. These apples will be your best friend whenever you don't have a bed, so be sure to make good use of them. If you're in dire need of escaping, but you don't have enough health left to make that escape, then what you can do is to eat a gapple to have a better chance of surviving whatever you're about to do. This allows you to pull off plays that you would not have been able to do with your current health. For example, you know that you need to run past another team to get to a safer position, but your enemies are right behind you and you know that you can't take another hit from anyone. The gapple could give you exactly what you need in that situation to ensure that you can live that hit that you need to make your escape. If you've just lost your bed and your opponent is dead set on killing you right then and there, then what you can do just before the fight begins is to eat a gapple to give you a much better chance of winning this fight that you need to win in order to survive. Make sure that your opponent actually wants to kill or camp you first before making the decision to buy a gapple, because otherwise you can save that gold to buy other things that can aid in your escape, such as the TNT. If your opponent just runs off after you're breaking your bed, then there's obviously no need to buy a gapple immediately, and you should be focusing on getting out to a safer position instead. If you and your teammate are cornered and are forced to fight, then what you can do when you start getting low is to tell your teammate to cover for you while you heal up. Remember that you can also do the same for your teammate when they start getting low, especially since they will probably be low from having to cover for you. This increases the chance of you winning the fight drastically, especially if your opponent doesn't thirst for you when you're low. You can combo this with a fireball to buy yourself more time if you fireball your opponents in the face to knock them back. Consider the terrain of your battlefield too when choosing to use this tactic or not. If your position is not favorable, then I would refrain from consuming the gapple, since it would probably ruin your momentum in the fight and likely result in your demise, even if you were on the back foot from the beginning. This item works well in all game modes. In the early game, it's definitely not a good idea to buy a gapple unless your bed gets broken early. There are other things that would benefit you much more than the gapple would, and you should be prioritizing those things first. However, as the game goes on and you obtain more resources, having a gapple or two could actually go a long way, especially if your opponents are across the map from you. I would say that the gapple becomes most necessary when your bed gets broken though, since it's the only healing item in the game. As the only healing item, it becomes an absolute necessity for anyone trying to clutch a game after the bed gets broken, and I'm certain that all experienced Bedwars players would say the same. Overall, this item is good for the mid to late game, a waste of gold on the early game, and an absolute necessity when your bed gets broken. This mixture of viability makes it a very interesting item to say the least. Personally, it has carried me so many times through even the toughest of the games. Without this item, clutching games after your bed gets broken would be much more difficult to pull off, especially in the team game modes where you're forced to fight against more than one player in most cases. I would say that this item's weakest strength is defensively, since the tactic I describe is not very practical in most cases, since you likely don't even have enough time to open a shopkeeper if you want to save your bed. With that all being said, if you're not already using this item for your current game plan for when your bed gets broken, I think you really need some milk.
He needs some milk!
Speaking of milk, the next episode of How to Use will be covering the magic milk, and the episode after that one will be on the Underpearl, which will finally finish up the utility section. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Alright, that's it for me. Don't stop gaming, guys. Peace out.